This image is by Allison. Your protagonist is your niece who has her softball bat there. The stage is a field in the background. Costuming is just her normal clothes. She's not wearing a uniform. She's not wearing anything that lends itself to playing on a team, as you had discussed, but she's just in her normal clothes. The lighting is kind of midday light. Let's see, this was shot at 1:30 in the afternoon. So you have really harsh light coming across her. The areas of her face and arm are getting blown out here. And the action is her getting ready to swing the bat. So what you've talked about as far as your concept here is that your niece wants more softball. She wants to play more games. She wants more players involved so that she can have more friends playing softball, have more games and tournaments and whatnot. So the goal of this image would be to promote softball for girls. And I think that storyline could be more explicit if you had done this at a softball field. So if the stage, instead of being just in a backyard, was actually at a softball field where maybe she's playing, but no one else is there, like mom's throwing her balls or something. No one else is there, no team, no coach, all of that. I think that could start to fill out this story. So if you want to have an image with a story, we need to remember all of those steps: the protagonist, a stage, costume, lighting, action, drama. And from that, figure out what could be furthered in this image, and that would be a stage, I think. Lighting also could be improved, though shooting this in midday isn't a bad idea because that's when we expect baseball to happen, right? An afternoon baseball game is kind of what we are thinking of, our softball game. But we need to control that lighting. Also, here, this image is really pixelated again, and that's just not acceptable for these images. As I look at her face, I can see individual squares. So at this point, it's going to be deducted from your grade every time that you turn in images that are this pixelated. I've tried to bring it up in the past, but it hasn't been corrected. So now it's just going to start coming down on your grade, that you're not going to have full credit for images that have this pixelation. So it's something that I think could be corrected by simply resaving your original image at the correct size. All right, this image is by Nancy. Protagonist is pretty clear. I think this might have been your niece as well. The stage is her bedroom. So her bed, her stuffed animals, her pink wall, all of this is really important to the stage. The costume, I think Linda pointed out that her being in black is really symbolic of that age. And I'm not around a lot of girls this age, so I'm not that familiar with it. But that makes sense that you kind of go through this like cool time where you have to wear all dark clothes and everything. The lighting looks like it's just indoor lighting. It doesn't look like you've added any lighting here. And her face is lightened up some. So I'm not sure if it doesn't seem like that's coming from the phone. So I'm guessing that is something that you've done a little bit in post-production. Like if we look at the difference between her face and her hands, it looks like there might be some lightening that's happened. But I'd like to see actual light brightening her up and creating separation in her hair and whatnot. And the action is kind of the inaction of her just looking at her phone, kind of being spaced out and looking at her phone. And the catchlight in her eyes is coming from the phone. And I think that works so well, that this kind of zombied over look of kids these days as they're looking at their devices all the time, right? And I think that you, Nancy, had talked about the addiction that happens when kids are on devices at such a young age. And so this really has a strong narrative. I think this might actually work well as a mini essay where you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, where we could see the repetition of this. Instead of just seeing one image that would supplement an article, looking at a few images where there's life going on around, but this subject is so involved in their device that they're not looking up from that. So I think you could definitely build this out to being more of an essay, and I think that would work really well. There's also a lot of negative space above her head, and I think some of that is good because we want to see the impact of that pink in the room and kind of the innocence of that and how that affects the image. But there's a lot of room up here, and I would bring down your framing a little bit or get closer on your framing to avoid this much negative unused space. We're looking at like a third of the image that's really unused, and negative space and unused space is different, right? Negative space is complementing the composition, where unused space is just not active space within the frame. And then this is the last image we have from Siyue. You're at ISO 100, 200 millimeter, or sorry, 20 millimeters, f11 at 1/400th of a second. Now this image says that it was shot in 2013, and I think you had mentioned having an older image here, so I'm curious about that. The subjects are these people that are walking by this temple. The stage is clearly the temple, but also the location of the temple, all of the mountains in the background. The costume is just what they're wearing there, which looks like more traditional fabric, right? The lighting is midday, harsh lighting, and the action is them kind of walking around this temple. Now, the lighting, they're walking away from it, so their figures we can see, but we can't see their faces. We're not brought into this because of the individuals. We're brought into this because of the massiveness of this temple. So if this is really about a portrait, we would want to have better light on the subjects and better definition on their faces so we can actually see who these people are. Changing your angle of view so it's more about the people and not overwhelmed by the temple, I think would be important. Also, I would probably back up a little bit as I'm photographing this if it is about the temple, so that you're not cropping in on the sides or especially on the top, right? So changing your angle of view to either be more about the people, and then maybe a crop on the temple would be appropriate, or more about the temple, and then you'd want to pull out more. The mountains are so important in this, the temple's so important in this, but if this is an image about people, we want them to be more important in this frame.